If you were to be remembered as the man who has made the Lord of the Rings, would you rather be remembered as a man who has said something or as a man who has made something?
I don't think you can distinguish. The made thing, unless it says something, won't be remembered.
Thank you.
And that light bulb moment where all of a sudden, like a flash, I realized what Tolkien was doing with the first time that I read Pope Leo XIII's incredible encyclical Aeterni Patris, where he begs practically and pleads with the Western world to return to the scholastic philosophy of Thomas Aquinas and do away with these ideologues and their sophistries of the Enlightenment, which does nothing but glorify man. And at the end, we see the problem with glorifying man. Of course, we wind up making a machine in our own image to worship, which will enslave us. But it was the reading of Aeterni Patris that really, as I read that, it came to my mind like an epic battle of ideas, and I realized that this was Tolkien's whole mythology was an answer, although belated, because he wrote that in 1879, in August, I believe, 1879. That was Tolkien's answer, Pope Leo XIII's cry to the Western world to return to Thomas Aquinas before it's too late. And I realized that's exactly what he did. And then that was one of the things that really opened up the mythology to me, so then I could start looking at it from the proper perspective. And once that happened, then I realized that this is all scholasticism, and it's all opposed to, and on the other side is Cartesian, is the Baconian Cartesian modern scientific approach, chasing wealth, long life, riches, eternal life, trying to make heaven here on earth. It's the old age-old cry of the Freemasons: we can have heaven here on earth. So that was the aha moment. And then as I realized the picture, it all fell together rapidly. The thing about that Tolkien did masterfully well, and he did this to protect his work, because we have to understand the time and the place that he was. He was at Oxford University in the mid 20th century. He was surrounded by all kinds of very heavy anti-Catholic, not only from the state, not only from England, but also from his fellow academics, his fellow professors and whatnot. So he really guarded his work very well. So what he did was, when he crafted this extensive masterpiece, and I want to make sure that I touch on something. You can't understand The Lord of the Rings without a really good, firm grasp of the history of the Silmarillion. The Silmarillion wasn't an afterthought. It's so critical to the whole thing. But what Tolkien did when he was finished, or about finished, Christopher published the Silmarillion posthumously because his father had died. But he took the work and he knew what he was doing to some degree, and he left us with the Silmarillion, thank God. But Tolkien put it in this incredible jigsaw puzzle masterpiece, and then he put it in a box, and he put a picture on the box that was not what the pieces made. The pieces didn't make what was on the box. He let people believe that it was about this world and the material world, maybe thousands of years ago, in some imaginary time and place. And that was fine. That was safe. That's exactly what Tolkien wanted. And he went out of his way to tell people, it really doesn't mean anything. Don't try to make anything out of it. Don't try to, he was very good about covering his tracks to make sure that any false application towards Nazism or any of the other ideologues that wanted to commandeer and use his mythology for their purposes, he wanted to make sure that he nipped that in the bud. And he did a beautiful job. And then he cast it into the future. He knew that in God's time, it would be figured out. Somebody would figure it out in God's time, and in time to meet the adversary that it was supposed to meet. And that adversary that it was supposed to meet is AI. So we're going to find out in these videos, we're going to find out exactly how Tolkien wrote this mythology and how it is fundamentally Catholic through and throughout, how it is about the fall, mortality, and the machine. So if we want to go into the characters the Ainur, the ones that are actually the most prominent in the song of the Ainur, including Melkor, okay, they came down in to live in Arda. And Arda is this now fertilized egg. And these are the what the scholastics call the facets of the soul, which they also call the powers. And so Tolkien calls the Ainur the powers. And they all fit exactly with the scholastic facets of the soul. Absolutely, their characteristics are flawless. Even who they're married to is absolutely. So you've got the vegetative soul, you've got the sensitive soul, and you have the rational soul. And there's 14 characteristics in all, and those are the 14 facets of the soul. They're all listed out in my book, who exactly they are. But then above these, in time and in maturity, now the young Arda, who's a human being, a human soul, body and soul, a substantial unity of body and soul, comes into the age of reason. And what happens at the age of reason is the trees of light. And the trees of light are produced by Yavanna and Nienna. And Yavanna is the vegetative power of the soul of generation. And Nienna is the power of the soul, of the sensitive soul, the interior faculty of the soul, which is cognitive sense. And she's what brings all the other powers of the interior together to make sense. And the other powers of the interior are memory, which is Mandos. That's why everybody goes to the halls of the memory, and he forgets nothing. Sense memory, which is his wife, Vari. And then Ermo, who is his brother, who's the imagination. And then Nienna, who's cognitive sense, and she's the one that makes sense. So between Nienna, cognitive sense, and generation, they bring into being the trees of light. And the trees of light are, the silver tree is the rational will, and the golden tree is the rational intellect and the conscience. And in an unfallen state, they light the whole, they illuminate the mind in an unfallen state, and they wax and wane according to the harmonic overtone series. And I explain this in the book. But they wax and wane in what St. Augustine called the angelic knowledge that he describes in literal interpretation of Genesis. And so the mind is in this, of Arda, is in this pure unfallen state. So these are who the Valar are. And then we have Melkor, and Melkor is one of the Valar, but he has a portion of all of them. And what he is Melkor's original sin. He is the fall. He is the effect of the fall. That's why he mars everything and destroys everything and can't create anything. And he is the origin of all evil and all destruction and all the bad stuff, including Sauron, his first lieutenant, who later on Sauron becomes artificial intelligence. He's the machine. Sauron is the machine in the mythology. He doesn't start off that way, but over the 3 generations, he becomes the machine. And the mythology is about the struggle against transhumanism. And Arda now has become partly actually transhuman because it has a microchip in the cerebellum, the cerebellum is Mordor. And the microchip is there, and the Tower of Barad-dûr is the microchip. And it's about getting rid of the chip and destroying the One Ring. And the One Ring is ones and zeros. It's binary code. It's the heart of the mythology, is the language of the machine. Tolkien, the great philologist.
What started it? There must have been a point at which quite suddenly, like God, you chose to make the world like that.
I was going to use that illustration. That's one of his lessons. Because, as I've said elsewhere, I think that if you wish to push me back into what semi-theological or philosophical, I think because being made by a creator, one of our natural faculties is wishing to create. But since we aren't creators, we have to sub-create. Let's say we have to rearrange the primary material in some particular form which pleases us, which it isn't necessarily a moral pleasing, it's partly aesthetic pleasing.
Then you make this distinction between what pleases aesthetically because it's balanced and what pleases morally. God, we may assume, made a moral rather than an aesthetic choice. Is this too great an assumption?
It's one that would require a very long time to debate, but I should have thought that we are dealing with something which we're only looking at facets of one whole, but certainly an aesthetic whole is surely, an aesthetic facet is as strongly to be predicated as a moral one.